Imagine this. You've worked your entire life to reach the top of your profession. You're one of only 179 people in the entire United States to hold your position. You're literally one of the most powerful legal minds in America. You arrive at work. One Tuesday morning, you show your badge. You say your name, and the security guards don't believe you. They grab your arm. They escort you away. They treat you like a criminal, not because you did anything wrong, but because of the color of your skin. This is what happened to Judge Tamika Montgomery-Reeves, and what she did next. It changed an entire courthouse forever. If you've ever been judged unfairly because of how you look, this story is for you. If you've ever made assumptions about someone before you knew them, this story is definitely for you. Hit that like button right now. Subscribe to Truly Black and White, and prepare yourself for one of the most powerful lessons about respect, dignity, and treating people fairly. This is a true story about a federal judge. It's a black woman at the absolute top of her profession. In the moment that revealed how far we still have to go, let's begin. Before we get to what happened that day, you need to understand exactly who Judge Tamika Montgomery-Reeves is. Not because when you know her story, when you understand what she accomplished, and how hard she worked, what happened to her becomes even more shocking, even more unacceptable, even more important. Judge Tamika Montgomery-Reeves is a black woman who didn't just break barriers. She shattered them. She didn't come from wealth. She didn't have connections or family money or a famous last name. Everything she achieved, she earned. Every single step up that ladder, she climbed herself. As a young girl growing up, Tamika loved two things: reading and justice. She would read books about famous trials, about lawyers arguing for what's right, about judges making decisions that changed lives. And she dreamed big about becoming someone who could make sure the law was fair for everyone, not just for rich people, not just for white people, for everyone. But dreaming and achieving are two different things. Tamika worked incredibly hard in school. Straight A's weren't enough. She pushed herself even harder. She participated in debate teams. She volunteered. She studied when her friends were out having fun. She got into college. Then, even harder, she got into law school. Now let me explain something about law school. It's not like regular school. Law school is 3 years of intense study after you've already finished 4 years of college, reading hundreds of pages every night. You're analyzing complex legal cases. You're learning to think in ways that most people never do. And Tamika didn't just survive law school, she excelled. After law school, she became a lawyer, worked on important cases. She fought for justice. She built a reputation as someone who was brilliant, fair, and deeply committed to doing what was right. Her work was so exceptional that in 2015, something extraordinary happened. President Barack Obama nominated her to become a federal judge. On the United States Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit, let me break down how incredible this is. In America, we have different levels of courts. Think of it like a pyramid. At the bottom, you have regular trial courts where most cases are heard, where juries make decisions, where lawyers argue for their clients. In the middle, you have appeals courts where important cases go when someone thinks the trial court made a mistake. These courts don't use juries. They have judges, usually 3 at a time, who review cases and make decisions. At the very top is the Supreme Court, the 9 most important judges in the entire country. Judge Montgomery-Reeves serves on an appeals court. That makes her one of the most respected, most powerful legal minds in America. There are only 179 judges at this level in the entire United States, out of 330 million people. Only 179 hold this position, and Judge Montgomery-Reeves was the first black woman from Delaware to ever reach this level. Think about that. America has been around for almost 250 years. Delaware has been a state since the very beginning. And in all that time, all those decades, all those generations, she was the first. She didn't just break a glass ceiling. She broke through concrete, steel, and brick to get there. And she did it with grace, intelligence, and an unwavering commitment to justice. So when you picture Judge Tamika Montgomery-Reeves, don't just picture someone in a black robe sitting at a high desk. Picture a woman who overcame obstacles that would have crushed most people. Picture someone who worked twice as hard to get half the recognition. Picture a trailblazer who opened doors for every young black girl who dreams of becoming a judge. Picture one of the most accomplished legal professionals in America. Now let's talk about what happened that Tuesday morning. Tuesday morning, Wilmington, Delaware. The federal courthouse. Judge Montgomery-Reeves woke up at 5:45 a.m., just like she did every workday. She had important cases to hear. Lives would be affected by her decisions today. She took her responsibility seriously. She got dressed in professional attire, nice blouse, dress pants, appropriate shoes. But she wasn't wearing her judge's robe yet. That was folded carefully in a garment bag she'd carry with her. She'd put it on once she reached her chambers or private office at the courthouse. She gathered her briefcase. Inside were case files, legal briefs, notes she'd made the night before while reviewing arguments. These cases were complex. They mattered. She wanted to be prepared. At 7:15 a.m., she drove to the courthouse. She parked in her usual spot and walked toward the building. It was cold that morning. February in Delaware is harsh gray skies, bitter wind cutting through your coat. Judge Montgomery-Reeves hurried toward the entrance, her garment bag over one shoulder, her briefcase in her other hand. The courthouse had two entrances. One was the public entrance where regular citizens, witnesses, people with court business entered. They had to go through metal detectors, have their bags searched, show identification. The other was the official entrance where judges, court staff, and authorized personnel entered. This entrance had security too, but it was faster, more respectful. Of people's positions and responsibilities, Judge Montgomery-Reeves headed toward the official entrance. She had hundreds of times before. 2 security officers were stationed there. Let's call them Officer Davis and Officer Mitchell. They saw her approaching. And here's where the story takes its terrible turn. They didn't see a federal judge. They didn't see one of the 179 most important legal officials in America. They didn't see someone who had earned the highest honors in her profession. They saw a black woman. And their brains operating on implicit bias, they probably didn't even know they had made an assumption. She must be a defendant. Someone accused of a crime. Someone who didn't belong at the official entrance. Officer Davis stepped forward, blocking her path. Ma'am, you need to use the public entrance. This entrance is for court officials only. Judge Montgomery-Reeves stopped. She was surprised this had never happened before at this courthouse, but she remained calm. I am a court official, she said politely. Her voice was professional, patient. I'm Judge Montgomery-Reeves. Officer Davis looked at her skeptically. He didn't believe her. Think about that for a second. Here was a federal appellate judge telling a security officer who she was, and he didn't believe her. Ma'am, I need you to step back and use the public entrance, he repeated. His voice was firmer now, suspicious. Judge Montgomery-Reeves could feel her heart rate increasing. She'd experienced racism before, subtle moments, microaggressions, assumptions based on her race. But this was different. This was her workplace. This was her courthouse. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out her identification badge. Every judge has one. It clearly displays their name, their position, their photo. She held it up for Officer Davis to see. He barely glanced at it. This could be fake, he said. We get people trying to sneak in here all the time with fake IDs. This could be fake. Let those words sink in. Federal judge's official identification badge. He assumed it was fake. Not because it looked suspicious. Not because something was wrong with it. But because he couldn't believe a black woman could actually be a federal judge. Sir, Judge Montgomery-Reeves said, her patience beginning to wear thin, but her voice still controlled. I assure you, this is not fake. I am Judge Tamika Montgomery-Reeves. I sit on the Third Circuit Court of Appeals. I have cases to hear this morning, and I need to get to my chambers to prepare. Officer Davis called over his supervisor, Officer Mitchell. Officer Mitchell looked at the judge with the same suspicion. Instead of apologizing, instead of properly checking her credentials, instead of showing even basic respect, he made things worse. "Ma'am, if you don't move to the public entrance right now, we're going to have to physically remove you from the premises." Physically remove a federal judge from her own courthouse. Judge Montgomery-Reeves took a deep breath. She had reached a crossroads. She could argue. She could pull rank. She could call the chief judge. She could make these officers' lives very difficult very quickly. Or she could let this play out. She could use this moment as a teaching opportunity. She could turn this injustice into something meaningful. She chose the latter. "All right," she said quietly. "If you need to escort me, then please do so. But I need to get to courtroom 3A. I have a hearing that starts in 20 minutes, and I don't like to keep people waiting." The officers looked at each other. They still didn't believe her. But they figured escorting her to wherever she claimed she needed to go would expose her lie. Officer Davis took her arm. Not roughly, he wasn't trying to hurt her, but firmly, the way you'd escort someone who didn't belong. And they began walking her around the building toward the public entrance. People were arriving for work. Other lawyers, court staff, regular citizens with court business. And they saw this. A well-dressed black woman being escorted by security. Officers. Some people looked away, embarrassed for her. Some stared, making their own assumptions. Wonder what she did. Must have tried to sneak in. Must have caused some trouble. No one stopped to help. No one questioned what was happening. Judge Montgomery-Reeves walked with her head held high. She wasn't going to give anyone the satisfaction of seeing her humiliated. She wasn't going to cry or yell or cause a scene. She had learned a long time ago that maintaining your dignity in the face of disrespect is one of the most powerful things you can do. But inside, her emotions were churning. Anger. She'd worked her entire life to earn respect. These officers weren't giving it to her. Hurt, she was being treated like a criminal in her own. Workplace frustration. This was 2023, not 1963. And yet, here she was, being judged by the color of her skin rather than the content of her character. Sadness. How many other black professionals faced this same treatment every single day? But she kept walking, kept her composure, waited for what would happen next. As the security officers escorted Judge Montgomery-Reeves through the public entrance, something happened that would change everything. A lawyer was arriving for the same hearing. His name was Robert Chen. He was an experienced attorney who had practiced before Judge Montgomery-Reeves many times. He respected her immensely. She was known for being fair, brilliant, and thoroughly prepared. Robert was rushing because he was running a few minutes late. He came around the corner and nearly bumped into the security officers escorting the judge. He looked up, ready to apologize, and froze. "Judge Montgomery-Reeves," he said, confused. Then his eyes widened as he realized what was happening. "Your Honor, is everything all right?" The security officers turned to look at him. "Sir, this is a security matter," Officer Mitchell said firmly. "Please move along." Robert Chen looked at them like they'd lost their minds. "Do you know who this is?" The voice was rising now, a mix of disbelief and anger. It says Judge Tamika Montgomery-Reeves. She's a federal appellate judge. She's probably the most important person in this entire building right now. She's the one presiding over the hearing in courtroom 3A. The officers stopped walking. Officer Davis looked more closely at the identification badge still in Judge Montgomery-Reeves's hand, the one he'd dismissed as potentially fake. The color drained from his face. "Oh my God," he whispered. Then louder, "Oh my God, Your Honor, I am so sorry. I didn't. I should have." He let go of her arm like it had suddenly burned him. Officer Mitchell grabbed the badge, examined it closely. His hands were shaking. It was real. Of course it was real. They had just physically escorted a federal judge, treating her like a criminal, because they assumed a black woman couldn't hold that position. "Your Honor," Officer Mitchell stammered. "I apologize. This is ... This is inexcusable. I don't know what to say." Judge Montgomery-Reeves looked at both of them calmly. She could see the panic in their eyes. They knew they'd made a terrible mistake. They knew this could cost them their jobs. "It's all right," she said. Her voice was steady. "But we need to get to the courtroom. Court starts in 15 minutes, and I don't like to keep people waiting." Robert Chen was still standing there, furious on her behalf. "Your Honor, this is absolutely unacceptable. These officers should be Mr. Chen," Judge Montgomery-Reeves interrupted gently. "Thank you for your concern, but I'll handle this. We have a hearing to conduct." She turned back to the security officers. "Walk with me to my chambers, please." It wasn't a request. It was a command. Both officers followed her, their heads down. In shame, as she made her way through the courthouse, other court staff saw them walking together and looked confused. Why were security officers following the judge like scolded children? When they reached her chambers, Judge Montgomery-Reeves set down her briefcase and garment bag. She turned to face the two officers. She didn't yell. She didn't threaten. She simply asked a question. "Can you tell me why you assumed I didn't belong?" At the official entrance, the officers looked at each other. They knew the answer, but saying it out loud, admitting it was one of the hardest things they'd ever done. Officer Davis spoke first, his voice barely above a whisper. "Your Honor, I think it's because we don't see many black judges here, and when I saw you, I assumed you were here for court as a defendant. I didn't even look at your badge properly. I just assumed." "You assumed," Judge Montgomery-Reeves said gently but firmly, "that a black woman couldn't be a federal judge. You saw my skin color and made a decision about who I was before you looked at my credentials, before you asked my name, before you treated me like a fellow human being deserving of basic respect." Both officers nodded. There were tears in Officer Mitchell's eyes. "Your Honor, I have no excuse," he said. "You're right. I looked at you, and I saw your race first, not your credentials, not your badge. I made an assumption based on bias I didn't even know I had. And that," Judge Montgomery-Reeves said, "is exactly what we need to talk about." She pulled out 2 chairs. "Sit down, please." The officers sat, confused. They expected to be fired, reported, punished. They didn't expect this. "I'm not telling you this to make you feel terrible," the judge continued, "although I imagine you do feel terrible right now. I'm telling you this because what happened today happens to people every single day." She'll let that sink in. Black people, brown people, women, young people, old people, people who look different, or dress different, or speak different, judged often unfairly based on assumptions. And those assumptions can hurt people deeply. She paused, making sure they were listening. "You both have an important job. You keep this courthouse safe. You protect everyone who works here and everyone who comes here. That's noble work. But part of keeping people safe is treating everyone with dignity and respect until they prove they don't deserve it, not the other way around." Officer Davis was crying now too. "Your Honor, I am so sorry. This never should have happened. I'll resign if you want me to." "I don't want you to resign," Judge Montgomery-Reeves said firmly. "I want you to learn. I want you to examine your own biases, the ones you didn't even know you had. I want you to make sure this never happens to anyone else." She looked at both of them. "Can you do that?" They nodded vigorously. "Yes, Your Honor." "Absolutely, Your Honor. Good," she said. "Then use this as a learning experience. That's all I ask." She shook their hands, and thanked them for their service. The officers left her chambers in stunned silence. They'd expected punishment. Instead, they'd received a lesson in grace and dignity from the very person they'd wronged. Judge Montgomery-Reeves closed her door, put on her black robe, gathered her case files, and headed to the courtroom. She had a job to do. When Judge Montgomery-Reeves entered courtroom 3A, everyone stood up. It's tradition when a judge enters. "Everyone rises out of respect," the bailiff announced. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Tamika Montgomery-Reeves." The courtroom was full. Lawyers on both sides of the case, their clients, witnesses, court reporters. Members of the public who had come to watch. The judge took her seat at the bench, looked out at everyone assembled. She could have just started the hearing. Nobody in that courtroom knew what had happened to her 30 minutes ago. She could have kept it to herself, buried the humiliation, moved on, but she didn't. "Before we begin today's proceedings," she said, her voice clear and strong, "I want to share something that happened to me this morning. I believe it's relevant to the work we do here." The courtroom fell completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Judge Montgomery-Reeves told them the whole story. She explained how she was stopped at the entrance, how the security officers didn't believe she was a judge, how they dismissed her badge as potentially fake, how she was escorted like someone who didn't belong. "I'm not sharing this to embarrass anyone," she said. "I'm not sharing it to complain or seek sympathy. I'm sharing it because it illustrates something we must all confront." She paused, looking at the faces in the courtroom. "Our justice system is built on the principle that everyone is equal under the law, that we judge people not by their appearance, but by facts and evidence. We presume innocence until guilt is proven." Her voice grew stronger. "But this morning, I was presumed guilty of not belonging simply because of the color of my skin. I was judged before I had a chance to present my credentials. I was treated as less than because of an assumption." She let that sink in. If this can happen to me, a federal judge, someone with every credential and marker of authority, imagine how often it happens to regular people. Imagine how many black men and women are presumed guilty, presumed to be troublemakers, presumed to be less than simply because of how they look. There was a long silence. "When you leave this courtroom today," Judge Montgomery-Reeves continued, "I want you to remember something. Every person you meet deserves to be treated with respect and dignity. Don't judge someone based on assumptions. Take the time to see them as individuals. Take the time to look at facts, not biases. Take the time to treat them fairly." One of the lawyers, a white man who had been practicing law for 30 years, stood up. "Your Honor, may I say something?" "What happened to you this morning should never have happened," he said, his voice emotional. "But your response to it shows exactly why you belong on that bench. Thank you for using this painful moment to teach us all something we desperately need to learn." And then something unprecedented happened. The entire courtroom, lawyers, defendants, court staff, spectators began to applaud. Not polite golf claps, real applause. Standing ovation applause. In a federal courthouse where decorum and protocol rule everything, where showing emotion is rare. The entire room stood and applauded a judge who had just been treated like a criminal in her own workplace. Judge Montgomery-Reeves' eyes glistened with tears, but she smiled. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Now, shall we proceed with today's cases?" And she did her job. She heard arguments. She asked tough questions. She made fair decisions. Because being a judge isn't about demanding respect for yourself. It's about giving justice to everyone. News of what happened spread through the courthouse like wildfire. By lunchtime, everyone knew. By the end of the day, it had reached the media. The security officers who had escorted Judge Montgomery-Reeves were devastated. But true to her word, the judge didn't file a formal complaint against them. However, she did request a meeting with Michael Sullivan, the head of courthouse security. When Mr. Sullivan entered her chambers that afternoon, he was already apologizing. "Your Honor, I am so deeply sorry for what happened this morning. There's no excuse. Those officers will be disciplined. That's not why I called you here," Judge Montgomery-Reeves interrupted. "I don't want them punished. I want the system changed." Mr. Sullivan sat down, listening intently. "This morning happened because those officers had implicit biases they weren't aware of," the judge explained. "They weren't bad people trying to do a bad thing. They were people with unconscious prejudices, making assumptions." She leaned forward. "We need to implement proper training, not just for those two officers, but for everyone. Security personnel, bailiffs, court staff, even other judges. We all have biases. The question is, are we addressing them?" Over the next month, Judge Montgomery-Reeves worked with courthouse administration to create a comprehensive training program, Implicit. Bias training became mandatory for all courthouse employees. Let me explain what implicit bias means, because it's one of the most important concepts in this story. Implicit bias is when your brain makes quick judgments about people based on things like race, gender, age, or appearance without you even realizing it's happening. Your conscious mind might believe everyone deserves equal treatment, but your unconscious mind might still carry stereotypes and assumptions you've absorbed from society, media, or past experiences. For example, if you see a doctor and automatically assume it's a man, that's implicit bias. If you see someone with tattoos and assume they're not educated, that's implicit bias. If you see a black person in a courthouse and assume they're a defendant rather than a judge, that's implicit bias. Good people can have implicit biases. Even people who genuinely believe in equality can carry unconscious prejudices. The training program Judge Montgomery-Reeves helped create taught courthouse staff to recognize their own biases. Everyone took tests that revealed unconscious associations. They held. Pause before making assumptions. Instead of reacting automatically, they learned to take a breath and question their first thoughts. Verify credentials properly. Actually look at identification badges. Actually listen when someone tells you who they are. Treat everyone with equal respect, regardless of appearance. Whether someone is dressed in a suit or jeans, whether they're white or black, young or old, everyone deserves the same basic respect. The two security officers who had escorted Judge Montgomery-Reeves became the program's biggest advocates. They shared their story openly during training sessions. They admitted their mistake. They described how their implicit bias had led them to disrespect someone who deserved the utmost respect. "I thought I wasn't a racist person," Officer Davis said. During one session, his voice shaking. "I have black friends. I've never used racial slurs. I thought I treated everyone the same." He paused. "But when I saw Judge Montgomery-Reeves that morning, I made an assumption based on her race. I didn't even realize I was doing it. My brain just went, black woman at the courthouse equals defendant, and that was wrong. That was racist, even though I didn't intend it to be." His honesty was powerful. It helped other people recognize their own biases without feeling attacked or defensive. Officer Mitchell added, "The judge could have gotten us fired. She could have made our lives very difficult. Instead, she taught us. She showed us grace. And now we have a responsibility to make sure no one else makes the same mistake we did." The training program worked. Within 6 months, there were 0 reported incidents of courthouse personnel treating judges, lawyers, or other officials disrespectfully based on appearance. But Judge Montgomery-Reeves didn't stop there. She began speaking at schools, community centers, and professional organizations about her experience. At one high school visit, a student raised her hand. "Judge Montgomery-Reeves, weren't you really angry when they didn't believe you were a judge?" The judge smiled. "Yes, I was angry. I was hurt. I was frustrated. Those are all valid emotions when you're treated unfairly." She leaned forward, making eye contact with the student. "But I've learned something important. Anger alone doesn't change things. Action changes things. Teaching changes things. Showing people a better way changes things." Another student asked, "What if they had been really mean to you? What if they had hurt you physically?" Judge Montgomery-Reeves considered the question carefully. "That's an excellent question. The officers in my case made a mistake based on bias. But they weren't trying to harm me. They were doing their job, just based on wrong assumptions." She paused. "However, if someone had been violent or truly malicious, meaning they were trying to hurt me on purpose, then I would have had to take stronger action. There's a difference between a mistake based on unconscious bias and an intentional act of hatred." She looked around the room at all the young faces. They both are wrong, but they require different responses. We should always try to educate first when possible. But we also have to stand up for ourselves and others when someone is being deliberately harmful. Justice means being both compassionate and firm.
So what can we learn from Judge Montgomery-Reeves' story? How does this apply to our everyday lives? Lesson 1. Don't judge people by appearances. This seems obvious, right? But think about how often we all do it. You see someone and your brain immediately makes assumptions. This person looks young, so they must not be experienced. This person is wearing old clothes, so they must not be successful. This person has dark skin, so they must not be in a position of authority. This person is heavy, so they must not take care of themselves. This person has tattoos, so they must be rebellious. These snap judgments happen in milliseconds. But they're often wrong, and even when they're sometimes right, they're not fair. Everyone deserves to be judged by their character, their actions, their words, not by how they look. Think about your own life. Have you ever been underestimated because you're young? Have you ever been told you can't do something because of your gender? Have you ever been treated differently because of where you're from or how you talk? If you have, you know how much it hurts. And if you haven't, imagine how you would feel if someone dismissed you without even knowing you. Lesson 2. Respond to ignorance with education, not just anger. When those security officers treated Judge Montgomery-Reeves unfairly, she had many options. She could have yelled at them, threatened them, gotten them fired, made a huge scene. Instead, she chose to teach. She explained why their actions were wrong. She helped them understand their own biases. She turned a negative experience into a positive learning opportunity. This doesn't mean you should never be angry when someone treats you unfairly. Anger is valid. It's a natural response to injustice, but what you do with that anger matters. You can use anger to destroy and punish, or you can channel it into teaching and creating change. Judge Montgomery-Reeves chose the latter, and because of that choice, an entire courthouse changed its policies and hundreds of people learned important lessons. Lesson 3. We all have biases, and that's okay as long as we work to overcome them. Those security officers weren't evil people. They didn't wake up that morning planning to be racist. But they had biases they weren't aware of, and those biases led them to make unfair assumptions. We all have biases, every single one of us. Even Judge Montgomery-Reeves probably has some. Even I do, even you do. The question isn't whether you have biases. The question is, are you willing to recognize them and work to overcome them? When someone points out that you've made an unfair assumption, do you get defensive and deny it? Or listen, learn, and try to do better? The security officers in this story did the right thing after their mistake. They admitted they were wrong, apologized, sincerely learned from the experience, became advocates for change. That's what matters. Lesson 4. Small actions can lead to big changes. Judge Montgomery-Reeves didn't set out to revolutionize courthouse security that day. She was just trying to get to work. But because she spoke up about what happened, because she used it as a teaching moment, an entire system improved. Now every person who enters that courthouse is treated with more respect. Now every security officer is better trained. Now every young person who hears this story learns about treating people fairly. You don't have to be a judge or a president or a celebrity to make a difference. You can make a difference right where you are by treating people with respect, speaking up against unfairness, being willing to examine your own biases, choosing education over anger. Lesson 5. Dignity and grace are powerful tools. Throughout this entire experience, Judge Montgomery-Reeves maintained her dignity. She didn't yell, she didn't insult anyone, she didn't lose her composure. This doesn't mean you should never show emotion when you're hurt. Emotions are valid and important, but there's power in maintaining your dignity even when someone treats you poorly. When you respond to disrespect with grace, when you respond to assumptions with facts, when you respond to prejudice with education, you take away the other person's power to diminish you. Judge Montgomery-Reeves showed everyone that you can stand up for yourself while still treating others with respect. You can demand justice while still offering grace. That's true strength. You might be thinking, this is a powerful story, but what does it have to do with me? I'm not a judge. I'm not a security officer. I'm just a regular person. But here's the truth. This story has everything to do with you because the lessons apply to everyone every day in ways big and small. At school, have you ever seen a new student get judged before anyone even talked to them? Maybe they dress differently. Maybe they have an accent. Maybe they look different from everyone else. And before anyone knows anything about them, assumptions are made. Whispers start. They get excluded. They eat lunch alone. What would Judge Montgomery-Reeves want you to do? Pause before making assumptions. Actually talk to that person. Give them a fair chance. At the store, imagine a security guard follows you around the store, clearly assuming you might steal something. How does that feel? Probably terrible, right? Now imagine you're working at a store. Someone walks in who looks different from your usual customers. Do you automatically assume they're going to cause trouble, or do you treat them with the same respect you'd treat anyone else in your family? Have you ever had an adult not take you seriously because you're young? You're too young to understand. When you're older, you'll know better. That's a cute idea, but let the adults handle this. That's ageism, judging someone based on their age. And it works both ways. Sometimes young people dismiss older people, assuming they don't understand technology or modern life. The lesson is always the same: don't judge people based on categories. Judge them based on character, actions, and words. Here's a challenge for you. For the next week, pay attention to the assumptions you make about people. When you see someone, notice what your brain automatically thinks. Are you making assumptions based on how they look, how they dress, their race, their age, their gender? Don't beat yourself up if you notice you do this. Remember, everyone has biases. The important thing is recognizing them and choosing not to act on them. Instead of acting on your first assumption, pause, ask yourself, what do I actually know about this person? Have I given them a fair chance? Am I judging them by facts or by prejudice? This simple pause can change everything. It can turn a potential act of unfairness into an opportunity for connection. It can prevent hurt feelings. It can make someone feel seen and valued instead of judged and dismissed. That's how we build a better world, one interaction at a time. Judge Tamika Montgomery-Reeves is still serving on the federal bench today. She continues to make fair and wise decisions in important legal cases. She continues to inspire young people across America. The security officers who escorted her that day, they're still working at the courthouse too, but they're different now. They're better. They've learned from their mistake and they help train new officers to avoid making the same one. And that courthouse in Delaware, it's become a model for other courthouses around the country. Their bias training program has been adopted in multiple states, all because one woman chose to turn an unfair experience into a teaching moment. But here's the most important part. This story isn't just about what happened in a courthouse in Delaware. It's about how we treat each other every single day. We live in a world where people are constantly judged by things they can't control. Their race, their gender, their age, their appearance, where they were born, how much money their family has, but we have the power to choose something different. We have the power to look past surface things and see the person underneath. We have the power to treat everyone with respect and dignity. We have the power to pause before making assumptions. We have the power to be better. Judge Montgomery-Reeves worked her entire life to reach the top of her profession. She broke barriers, she opened doors, she proved that excellence has no color, and she still faced assumptions and prejudice based on the color of her skin. But she responded with grace, wisdom, and a commitment to making things better, not just for herself, but for everyone. That's the kind of person we should all strive to be. Not perfect, none of us are perfect, but willing to learn, change, stand up for what's right, help others do the same. So the next time you meet someone new, remember this story. Remember to look past assumptions. Remember to give people a fair chance. Remember to treat everyone with the respect they deserve. And if you ever face unfair treatment yourself, and unfortunately you probably will, remember Judge Montgomery-Reeves. Remember that you can stand up for yourself with dignity. Remember that you can turn a negative experience into a positive lesson. Remember that you have the power to make things better, because humanity has no color, justice has no color. And respect should be given to everyone simply because they're human, not because of their job title, not because of their achievements, not because of how they look, simply because they're human. That's the lesson Judge Tamika Montgomery-Reeves taught with grace under pressure. That's the lesson those security officers learned through honest self-examination. And that's the lesson we can all carry forward in our daily lives. If this story moved you, challenged you, or made you think, hit that like button right now. Subscribe to Truly Black and White for more powerful stories about courage, justice, and treating people with dignity. And tell us in the comments, have you ever been judged unfairly based on your appearance? How did you handle it? Share your stories, learn from each other, because these conversations matter. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message. With your family, with your friends, with anyone who might benefit from this powerful lesson. Remember, history isn't just something that happened to other people. It's happening right now, and you're a part of it. What role will you play? Will you be someone who makes assumptions, or someone who gives people fair chances? Will you be someone who judges by appearance, or someone who judges by character? Will you be someone who stays silent when witnessing injustice? Or someone who speaks up? The choice is yours. Choose wisely, choose kindness, choose justice. See you in the next video.